Hey everyone, Andy Raffel from eTechnics.com, and over the last couple of days since it launched, we've been testing Borderlands 3. So we thought, well, it's only right to test all of these graphics cards and show you exactly how it performs, as well as maybe a few little tweaks, just to kind of get the very best experience from it. Let's do this. So first up, I want to apologise probably for the audio, because as you can see on the test bench I've got the AMD reference 5700 XT, and I mean if I get this mic close, if we end up using the lav mic, you're going to be able to hear just the output that this graphics card is really sort of kicking out, and that's just on the menu screen. So luckily there are obviously AIB cards out there now, and we've tested a few actually in this game. I haven't got them with me right now because we have had to rotate them, but you will be able to see kind of the results between a reference card and obviously moving on beyond that. But with that all aside, you can see that we do have a mammoth of graphics cards here, mainly on the NVIDIA side, because obviously AMD only really have the 5700 XT and the 5700. But other than that, we wanted to kind of, delve into, say, some of the older cards, so 2070, 2080, as well as the Super Series, and even some of the lower end cards. Now, we are going to be testing all of these graphics cards at 3 different resolutions. So we've got your 1080p, 1440p, and of course 4K results. Now, while we're not expecting cards like the 1660 to do amazing at 4K, it still serves for a really good comparison. So let's jump in and take a look at the graphics settings that we used. So before I actually get started and show you, I guess, a couple of benchmark runs and then show you the full results that we've got, I just want to talk through some of the things that are, I guess, a little bit wrong with the game. Now, any game that has kind of released this year has had its fair share of problems. Look at World War Z when that first came out, it pretty much had a day one patch. Borderlands 3, sadly, is exactly the same. There are some slight issues, the first being DX12. Now, we will actually put up results for one card because you'll straight away see the problems that we had with DX12. Basically gave us performance increases across 2 resolutions and then gave us quite a dramatic performance decrease in the last resolution. So we decided to skip that altogether, and maybe we'll do some kind of follow-up content where we look at DX12 and show you some of the results that we were actually able to get from it. Now, with that in mind, we have actually seen tweets from Gearbox, and they've basically said that they are getting feedback from the community, and it isn't just on PC. There are some issues on sort of the console versions as well. So it's good to see that they are kind of looking at what's going on in the community, because they do want to make this the best game of the year. Now, other things that you can do to this if you are in a hurry is, and we will put up all the instructions, you can basically ditch the loading screen at the beginning, so the video at the beginning, which gets you into the game a lot quicker. But let's move on to sort of looking at the options and exactly what kind of graphical settings we are using. So to start with, we're at 16:9, 3 resolutions, so 1080, 1440 and 4K. Resolution scale set to 100%, VSync is of course off because we don't want to be restricted in any way, and the frame rate limit is also set to unlimited. Obviously, you can change around like field of view, vehicle field of view, and so forth. You can even calibrate your display and the safe area. If we go into advanced, you can see that we do get the option to go from DirectX 11 to DirectX 12. All of the testing that we've done, apart from that one set of results which we've put up on screen, is all in DirectX 11 mode. Performance stats, you can actually have this show up, this little bit up here. So our frames per second is obviously the important one there. Overall quality, now this is something you have to be aware of if you are a reviewer or you're looking at benchmarking graphics cards, because it will automatically set the overall quality for the particular graphics card that's actually in the test bench. Now, when we put in, say, a 2080 Ti, it bumps it all the way up to Ultra. So when we started doing our benchmarks, we noticed that the results were not as consistent as what we were expecting, and it's because it automatically changed it. So we've decided to go with the high preset just to give us a bit of scope on the lower end cards all the way up to the high end. This means that our anti-aliasing is set to temporal. Everything is pretty much on apart from motion blur, but we have texture streaming and shadows, and everything's set to high. Now, one little kind of glitchy thing that we have noticed with the settings is if you were to set this to medium and then actually set all of the settings that you can see here too high, it will kind of set it as a bit of a custom profile, but it will alleviate any glitching that we've only actually experienced in one of our runs, but we have heard sort of from the community that, a lot more is going on there. So let's jump in and take a look at the benchmark. Now, when you actually look at this, it does give you your average frames per second on the last benchmark run. So it's quite a nice kind of handy feature, and you can save it to a CSV file or a text file. But let's start the benchmark. This is running at 1080p on the 5700 XT, and we're going to see exactly what kind of frame rates we're going to be getting. So now that we're into the benchmark, you can see typical kind of Borderlands 3, I guess, graphics. It is a bit cartoony, a bit probably comic-like is the best way of explaining it. You can see with the high quality settings on, there's lots of lights going on, explosions, and you're seeing kind of, you know, some nice shadows, reflections in the water, and we are getting sort of 94, 95 frames per second, dropping down a little bit as the scene's changing into sort of darkness, but generally a very, very playable frame rate at 1080p, especially on a 5700 XT. You will notice in a minute that things kind of get a little bit darker. Frame rate's actually going up above 100 frames per second now. But we will show you kind of the results of this at the end, and then we'll talk through all of the other benchmarks. So now that the benchmark's finished, you simply go back into options, go to visuals, go back to the benchmark tab, and you can see the average FPS that we got, so 98.43. Now we have run these tests multiple times on every single card. It's taken quite a while, but that's why you will see in our results that the kind of results are slightly different to this, purely because we do run it kind of 3 times and then we look at averages, just for consistency, to make sure there's no errors, that kind of stuff. So without further ado, let's take a look at the rest of them glorious benchmarks on all them graphics cards that you saw earlier. Roll the benchmarks. So with Borderlands 3, it hasn't gone without its fair share of problems at launch, but it's good to see that Gearbox are actively looking at the community and trying to find fixes and trying to sort of, I guess, roll out updates as and when they're able to. You did see the results generally are pretty good at high, even on sort of the lower end cards. So everything from, I guess, lowest end being the 1650 all the way up to the 2080 Ti, and of course with them 2 AMD cards in between, the 5700 and the 5700 XT. And you did see that we had the Power Color and the Gigabyte Gaming OC ones in there, just to, I guess, show you the difference between the reference ones, which are still being as noisy as ever, as we've come to expect, and those, I guess, custom AIB cards. Let me know in the comments section below, are you playing Borderlands 3? Is it potentially going to be the game of the year? I'd really sort of like to know. Sadly, I never really got into the whole Borderlands thing, but maybe I'll give it another try soon. Maybe even when they've fixed and ironed out some of the bugs, and maybe even when I can run it under DX12. There you go, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one. You know what to do. Bye-bye. See you later. So there we have it, Borderlands 3. It hasn't gone without its fair share of kind of launch, I always say kind of and obviously, have you noticed that? So before I actually sort of go into the benchmark side of things and sort of show you some, I guess, real life footage, real life? And we will go through all of the settings later on in this video. So, not later on, it's in about 5 seconds. So, now we are going to be testing all of these graphics cards at 3 different.